Whenever you have a political party split, or whenever you have a serious third party candidate, generally speaking, what happens is that that third party doesn't win. They act as a spoiler and they screw up life for one of the two main candidates. Or when it's a party that splits, it essentially means that that party has just lost the election to the other party. In 1992, you had a third party candidate with a guy named Ross Perot. He didn't win, and all he did was take votes away from George H.W. Bush and gave the election to William Jefferson Clinton. Then you had in 2000, you had Al Gore versus George W. Bush, different Bush. But it all came down to Florida. In that year, you had a guy by the name of Ralph Nader running as the Green Party candidate. And he got somewhere about 4,000 votes in Florida. Okay, not a lot. But the final tally came down to George Bush winning the state by about 200 votes. If those votes had gone to Al Gore, which they more than likely would have, then Al Gore would have won and would have been president. But the third party was able to basically act as a spoiler. Now, in this case, the Republicans have split. You have the conservative and progressive wings of the party not really happy with one another, and they're going to end up splitting at the convention. TR tried to get the nomination, but did not. So he and the progressive wing are now going to go about actually creating their own party that we talked about previously, the Bull Moose Party. And essentially all this is going to do really is that it's going to split the Republican vote and give the election to the Democrats. 1912, the Democrats are going to win the White House. 1912 is one of the most fascinating elections in the history of the United States, in my opinion. You're going to have four very sizable personalities running for the office of president. The thing is, I mentioned this previously, the Constitution does take into account the possibility of this happening. In fact, if no one gets a majority in the Electoral College, then it goes to the House of Representatives to be decided. The top two vote getters would. So in this case, there was that possibility. However, with the Republicans being disjointed and the Democrats being united, they're going to stand a much better chance. Now, you do throw in as well a Socialist Party candidate in the person of Eugene V. Debs. You might remember that name from previous chapters. You're going to see a massive shift in U.S. politics. Now, this is Woodrow Wilson. Okay, at the time, he was the governor of New Jersey. Okay, he also had been the former head of Princeton University. So he is a very well-educated individual. He is a very progressive individual. While there were conservative and progressive wings within the Democratic Party, just like within the Republican Party, the Democrats were going to be much more along the lines of the progressives. Okay, so the Democrats are going to go through and they're going to nominate New Jersey Governor Woodrow Wilson. Now, he was seen as somebody who was squeaky clean. He wasn't touched by scandal or the various machines or anything like that. And so they thought that this was a pretty good bet. Okay, so now you have the Republican candidate, William Howard Taft. You have the progressive candidate, Teddy Roosevelt. You have the Democratic candidate, Woodrow Wilson. So let's throw one more in. The Socialist Party of the United States is going to nominate Eugene V. Debs. Now, you might remember him, as I said, from previous chapters in regards to, labor leader and union organizer and things along those lines. He's going to be in there as well, and he's going to get a sizable number of votes, ladies and gentlemen. He's not going to come close to winning, but you're never going to see a socialist candidate in any of the elections from that point forward get anywhere near the votes that Eugene Debs did. He received more than 1 million. I can't remember the exact number, but it was more than 1 million votes. Now, Wilson campaigned on a platform referred to as New Freedom. And this New Freedom is really going to be a lot of the progressive ideals where we're talking about tariff reform, business reform, banking reform, things along those lines. Both Wilson and TR are going to push for government to have a larger role in life so that they can go through and they can handle these various issues and get through these reforms that they saw as being necessary. You got to understand, they both supported more government supervision of businesses. Okay, again, Teddy Roosevelt had not been an individual that was, necessarily against all business. He was just against, remember what we said, were the bad trusts, the ones that he saw as harming the American people. Wilson is going to be different. You're not going to see the exact same kind of thought process. You're going to see Wilson looking at every monopoly, every trust as being a problem. Instead of there being some trusts that were actually a general good for the people, Wilson's going to look at trusts as bad, period. And generally speaking, this is going to be the big difference between the two. Wilson and Roosevelt both are of a like mind in the regards to the needed changes within business. However, both of them do go through and look at things in a very different light. So, like I said, you do have with Wilson and his New Freedom a lot of the progressive ideals that they had been pushing for a while. And you're going to see that he gets his chance. Now, the question is, would he have gotten that chance had the Republican Party not split? And again, that's just one of those weird things that historians like to talk about. Now, we also mentioned Eugene V. Debs. Now, he was a socialist candidate, okay, straight up socialist. He wanted the redistribution of wealth. Eugene Debs thought that what we needed to do was essentially take all of the money in the entire nation, all the money held by individuals, didn't matter how much or how little you had, figure out how much money there was, essentially, and, give everybody an equal share. Now, to those who essentially had very little, this seemed like a great idea. To those who, had worked hard for the money they had, they didn't like this idea. I give you the example of your grades. If, the option were given that instead of, whatever your grade was, we could just go through and give everybody what the average of the class was. Those who had something below whatever that average was, probably very happy with the plan. Those of you who had worked really hard and studied and got a good grade, probably less than happy with that plan. But again, this was sort of the Socialist Party platform at the time. So you can see that the candidates are all really pushing and pulling in different directions. But when all is said and done, it's going to be Governor Wilson is going to be the one who ends up winning the presidency. He's going to be the first Democrat in years to actually have the office of the president, and he's going to definitely make his mark. Not the least of which is he will be president when we actually go into World War I.